So, Ms. Spanberger, you're on this bus trip through the Commonwealth, and everybody's watching this race so closely to get a sense of where the voters are in this first year of this second Trump term. What are you hearing from voters?
Everywhere we have traveled, certainly along the campaign trail, but specifically this week on the bus tour, it remains the same. People are excited about the reality that in Virginia, we get to go to the polls this November, that in Virginia this November, we have an opportunity to demonstrate with our votes the priorities that we Virginians share. And certainly those are the issues that I've been talking about across the campaign trail, because those are the issues I'm hearing about, issues of affordability and housing and health care and energy bills, and the future of our public education system in Virginia, as well as recognizing that at this really uneasy time where we see so much chaos coming out of Washington that, in addition to creating major challenges for the more than 320,000 federal employees who call Virginia home, that we see the uneasiness and the chaos it's creating for our economy. The on again, off again trade wars are driving prices up for families, and it's just a challenge of a time. And so those are the things that I'm hearing about across the campaign trail, but I also am hearing a lot of enthusiasm and a sense of responsibility that this November, Virginia gets to be the first to the polls, along with our friends up in New Jersey, to be able to make clear what it is that we want in our state leadership.
One of the other reasons there's so much intrigue in this race is, frankly, it's because you're in it, and you won 3 times this very competitive congressional district in a pretty competitive state. You managed to win over some independents and some Republican voters. Are you talking to people who say, I voted for Trump and I have thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hearing from people who say everything from, that they've always been a Republican, or they've historically voted Republican, or even that they voted for Trump just this past November. But this is not what I voted for is a common refrain. And so I'm hearing that from people across Virginia. And I'm also hearing just a level of interest, like a recognition that in fact those who, even if they did vote, and no matter which way they voted in November, although some folks who actually just didn't even vote last November, saying, now they're sort of jolted to attention, recognizing that in fact, for many people, this administration and its impact on Virginians has been worse than they anticipated. And frankly, in a circumstance where we see in our current governor and in the lieutenant governor, who of course is my opponent this November, we see Virginia leadership that's not standing up for Virginians, that's not making clear the negative impact on people and on our economy of the choices coming out of the Trump administration, and what we're seeing likely to come out of this Republican-led Congress, particularly attacks on Medicaid, on the ACA. We know that in Virginia, at least 6 of our rural hospitals will be in dire threat if the bill that the House passed is signed into law. And the estimates on the Senate proposal are even worse. And people know that, particularly in places where they know that it's their hospitals that would be under threat.
Some of this cycle in Virginia has just been a little bit different, if not a little bit weird. Republicans are quite comfortable with their candidate. There's no primary. Winsome Sears, the lieutenant governor, is the nominee. The Democrats, there was no primary. Democrats either didn't think it was worthwhile or wise to challenge you. So they view you as the best representative of the party. So where should the party be going across the country? Because we see a whole range of Democrats that are competing in 2026.
So I think I'll pull it back to Virginia, because I don't want to speak for anybody in any other state. But what I know to be true in Virginia, and why I am so excited about so many of the candidates that we have running, certainly at the statewide level, but also we have 100 Democrats running in 100 House of Delegates seats. And there are people of their communities. They are people who want to go to Richmond and speak about the issues they're hearing from their communities. And as it relates to what drives me, I am campaigning on the issues that people have been bringing to me since I first got in this race. And my focus is solely and squarely on Virginia. And so I hope that if there's ever a kind of takeaway in the future, that it's, a candidate who was relentlessly focused on the strength of her Commonwealth, on being responsive to the needs of voters in every corner of her state, is the candidate who won.
Notwithstanding that, you must have some thoughts on the winner of the New York mayoral primary, Mr. Mamdani. I mean, he becomes a standard bearer of your party in a major jurisdiction, and you aren't exactly politically the same.
So I would say this. I do not, to any degree, assess that I know much about New York City politics. And so I'll defer to my former colleagues, or for those who spend time as voters or spend their time in New York City to speak to that race. Because I know Virginia and our Commonwealth and the cities across Virginia, the counties across Virginia, the towns across Virginia. Everywhere I travel, people are talking about what it is that they want to see here at home. And it's a focus on affordability. It's a focus on lowering the cost of prescription drugs. It's recognition that, in some parts of our state, we've seen extraordinary increases in energy bills. We've seen rental communities purchased up by out-of-state companies, and prices have gone up. We've seen real challenges that impact people's ability to live in the communities that they want to live in and thrive in those communities. We know that Virginia's recovery after the pandemic in our math scores were 51st after every single state and the District of Columbia. And so Virginians want a governor who's focused on strengthening our education system and making sure that our kids, and I have 3 kids in Virginia public schools, our kids continue to learn in quality classrooms where the teachers are there for the long haul, where their governor respects their service to the community, where they are well paid, and where our kids are set up for success, whatever path they might choose, off into a career or off to college. That's what I'm hearing here in Virginia.
And your voters, your constituents, are so uniquely tied to the military in the Commonwealth, not just the Pentagon, all the naval stations, all the Army bases. Everything that happens in Virginia has so many connective tissues to the military. Are you surprised the public seems pretty split on their support of those airstrikes in Iran?
Well, I think importantly, in addition to our military footprint, which is extraordinary of all branches of service, we also have an extraordinary footprint of the intelligence community and the diplomatic community. And so I think that for those who have spent time in the national security space, certainly as I have as well as a former CIA case officer, there's a recognition and a clear-eyed view of the fact that Iran is a state sponsor of terror, that Iran is a destabilizing force within the Middle East, and that there is much more information necessary, certainly to be put before Congress, and ultimately, down the line before the American public. I think for so many of us, certainly as someone who has represented military installations and the people who serve there, as well as someone running to be the governor of Virginia, my concern is about what comes next, the impact on so many of the families that I have represented and the families I want to continue serving, because I think it is extraordinarily vital that the president and his leadership team have an understanding, a clear-eyed understanding of what might come next, and that we as a nation are prepared for that. And those are that's the core of my worry and concern at this moment, is what are we preparing for? How closely are we coordinating with our closest partners and allies? And certainly that into the future, the men and women of the armed services, as well as the diplomatic and intelligence communities, are protected. And certainly we saw a potential risk with the retaliatory intended strike on Qatar, and the potential risks that incidents like that could pose to our military personnel overseas in the future is what I continue to be worried about and want to ensure that there's congressional oversight of, and certainly that this administration has a plan moving forward.
Are you hearing from people when you campaign that they're worried their sons or daughters are going to get deployed, that this is sending us, despite the argument of a ceasefire, that this is sending us on a trajectory where service members are going to have to go somewhere?
I think across the board, people who have devoted themselves to service are both deeply committed to that service and the sacrifice that comes with it. You know, even outside of armed hostilities, the men and women of the Virginia Guard have served bravely and far from home in a variety of missions just during the time and over the years that I was in Congress. And so recognizing that, you know, it's a question of having loved ones in harm's way. It's also a question of having loved ones far from home for extended periods of time. And you know, that is something that so many families are used to and accustomed to. And I think that the priority for so many families across Virginia is that when those absences or when family members take those risks, that it's done with thoughtfulness and purpose, and an understanding of just how great the family's commitment and potential for sacrifice is. But I'm also hearing from families across Virginia who've been impacted by the DOGE cuts, federal employees who've devoted themselves to service, nurses at the VA, researchers at NIH, attorneys with a variety of different federal agencies, as you know, diplomats and civil servants who believe in serving their fellow Americans and our nation through public service. And so many of them have lost their jobs or continue to live in fear of losing their jobs. And so I hear from them, I hear from their loved ones, and I hear from their neighbors. And the small business owners who frequently see them come into their restaurants or their stores. The impact of what has already happened here domestically is impacting Virginia in a very impactful and detrimental way. And so, you know, now the international uneasiness that we see as a result of the strike in Iran adds to the worry that exists for so many families in Virginia.
When you scheduled this bus trip, did you expect it to be 99 degrees? Is the air conditioning working?
The air conditioning on the bus is mostly working.
Mostly.
I did not expect it to be an incredible heat wave coming through Virginia, but I think that it's actually just added to the excitement on the ground to see hundreds of people come out in outrageously gross, humid Virginia weather. Has added to, you know, I'm an eternal optimist, has added to a little bit of the fun. So we've endeavored to make sure we have a lot of water on hand for people who come out and join us at rallies and events. But it's been amazing to be together with community members across Virginia, and it adds to a good introductory, like, you know, thanks for the warm welcome, and we're not talking about the heat. So we've been leaning into that joke a little bit, maybe more than we should.
That makes it memorable. Ms. Spanberger, the rest of your bus trip, hope it goes well. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks so much for having me.